Hey you guys, thanks for joining me again for our chapter book story time. Are you guys ready for the conclusion of The Nutcracker by E.T.A. Hoffman? We are going to finish this up today and then tomorrow we'll get to start a new book. I am planning on reading, hold on, I'm going to get close here for a second so I can grab it, Trixie Belden, which is a mystery, and it's called The Secret of the Mansion. All right, so we'll start that up tomorrow. So, if you'll remember, last time we ended and Nutcracker was just introducing Marie to the capital. They had arrived in Sweet Town, right? Okay, so let me get my glasses on here. And we begin. Marie was more than a little surprised to hear such an elegant person address young Mr. Drosler as a prince. But she was soon distracted by a swirl of small, delicate voices talking around her. There was so much laughing and chattering and singing and playing of instruments that Marie could pay attention to nothing else. She asked Nutcracker what it all meant. "Oh, it's not unusual, dearest Mademoiselle Stahlbaum," he answered. "Sweet Town is a well-populated, happy city, and what you see now goes on here every day. Please come along a little farther." With just a few more steps, they came to the great marketplace, which was utterly magnificent. The houses surrounding the square were made of filigreed sugarwork, with balconies perched above balconies. In the center of the square there stood, like an obelisk, a lofty cake covered with sugar. The fountains around this cake spouted almond soda, lemonade, and other sweet drinks into the air. The gutters around the square were full of cream, which the people spooned up whenever they pleased. Thronging through the square were delightful small people numbering in the thousands, shouting, laughing, playing, and singing, in short, making all that joyful noise that Marie had already heard from a distance. There were beautifully dressed ladies and gentlemen, Greeks and Nubians, Tyrolese and Chinese, officers and soldiers, clergymen, shepherds, roly-poly sausage-men. Every conceivable type of person was parading about. The tumult grew louder in one of the corners. The people there were clearing a path, for the great mogul happened to be passing along in his canopied palanquin, attended by 93 grandees of the realm and 700 servants. So it happened that the Fishermen's Guild, about 500 strong, were celebrating a festival in the opposite corner of the square. What an unfortunate coincidence that the Grand Turk also chose this moment to cross the square with 3,000 janissaries, just as the fishermen were marching up to the cake obelisk, singing, "Hail, all hail to the glorious sun." The result was a thronging and shoving, shouting and squeaking. Soon lamentations arose, and in wails of pain, for one of the fishermen had knocked off a Brahmin's head, while the great mogul had been very nearly run down by a sausage man. The din grew wilder and wilder. Fistfights were beginning to break out when the man in the brocade robe, who had called Nutcracker a prince, climbed up to the top of the cake obelisk. After a bell had rung very clearly 3 times, this man shouted, "Pastry cook, pastry cook, pastry cook!" Instantly, the chaos subsided. After the entangled processions had been disentangled, the dirt properly brushed off of the great mogul, and the Brahmin's head stuck on once more, the merry noise began again. "Why did that gentleman call out pastry cook, Mr. Drosselmeyer?" Marie asked. "Ah, dear Mademoiselle Stahlbaum," said Nutcracker, "in this place, pastry cook means a mysterious and terrible power that represents the fate or destiny that rules these happy people. They're so afraid of it that simply saying its name will end the wildest tumult in a moment, as the mayor has just demonstrated. When they hear that name, nobody thinks any more about earthly insults, punches in the ribs, broken heads, and so on. Everyone looks inward and asks, 'What does it mean to be human? And what can I do with my humanity?'" Suddenly, Marie found herself standing in front of an astonishing castle that glowed pink and was ornamented with 100 beautiful towers. Here and there upon its walls, rich bouquets of violets, narcissus, I don't know how to say this word, narcissuses, wow, tulips and carnations were blooming. Their dark, glowing colors heightened the dazzling rose-tinged whiteness of the walls. The great dome of the central building, as well as the pyramid-shaped roofs of the towers, were studded with thousands of sparkling gold and silver stars. "Voila," said Nutcracker. "Here we are at Marzipan Castle." Marie noticed that one of the biggest towers was missing a roof, and that some men up on a scaffold made of cinnamon sticks were busy putting it on again. Nutcracker saw her questioning look and said, "This beautiful castle was threatened a short time ago with serious damage, if not with total destruction. Sweet Tooth, the giant, happened to be passing by, and he bit off the top of that tower and began to gnaw at the great dome. To placate him, the Sweet Town people brought him an entire quarter of the city and threw in a considerable slice of jelly bean and jam grove as well. That finally filled up Sweet Tooth, and he went on his way." Now Marie heard soft, beautiful music playing. Out came 12 pages with lighted clove sticks, which they held in their hands like torches. Their heads were made of pearls, their bodies were fashioned from emeralds and rubies, and their feet were beautifully worked pure gold. After them came 4 ladies about the size of Marie's Miss Clara, but so gloriously and brilliantly attired that Marie knew them to be princesses born and bred. They embraced Nutcracker most tenderly and shed tears of gladness, saying, "Oh, Prince, dearest Prince, beloved brother." Nutcracker seemed deeply touched. He wiped tears from his eyes, for they were flowing thick and fast. Then he took Marie by the hand and said, "This is Mademoiselle Marie Stahlbaum, the daughter of a highly respectable doctor. She is the one who saved my life. If she hadn't thrown her slipper just in the nick of time, if she hadn't obtained the retired colonel's sword for me, I would be lying in a cold grave at this moment, bitten to death by the evil Mouse King. I ask all of you here today, do you think that Pirlipat, princess though she is, can compare for a moment to Mademoiselle Stahlbaum in beauty, in goodness, or in virtue of any kind? I say no, no." All the ladies cried no as well. They embraced Marie and praised her in unison. "Oh, you noble savior of our beloved princely brother, excellent Mademoiselle Stahlbaum." Now they led Marie and Nutcracker into a hall of the castle where the walls were constructed of sparkling crystal. Marie was delighted by the furniture. There were the loveliest chairs, bureaus, and dining tables, all made of cedar or brazil wood, and all covered with golden flowers. The princesses bade Marie and Nutcracker to sit down, and then went off to prepare a banquet. Soon they returned with vast quantities of cups and dishes of the finest Japanese porcelain, as well as spoons, knives and forks, graters and stew pans, and other kitchen utensils of gold and silver. They also fetched the most delightful fruits and began to squeeze them daintily in their white hands and to mingle them with grated spices and sugared almonds. Marie could see how gifted these princesses were in the culinary arts and knew that she was in store for a magnificent banquet. But Marie also excelled at cookery, and she secretly wished that she could help the princesses. As if she'd read Marie's mind, the prettiest of Nutcracker's sisters handed her a little gold mortar and said, "Sweet friend, dear rescuer of my brother, would you mind grinding up a bit of this sugar?" Marie ground the mortar willingly. The sound of the scraping was like a lovely song. As she worked, Nutcracker described in detail the battle between his army and that of the Mouse King, and how his troops had behaved so badly, how the horrible Mouse King had all but bitten him to death, and how Marie had willingly sacrificed her most precious candies and toys to save him. During it all of it seemed to Marie that if what the Nutcracker was saying, and even the grating sound of her mortar, was growing ever more indistinct. Presently she became aware that a silver mist was forming around her like a cloud. The princesses, the pages, Nutcracker, and Marie herself were floating within it. A strange singing and buzzing and humming arose, and then died away in the distance. Marie felt as if she were riding the crest of a wave, climbing higher and higher and higher and higher and up. That's the end of the chapter. But before we move on, somehow didn't seem to be the right time to stop and show you this picture earlier. So here they are. Let's see if I can show you the other side here. There's Marie. She's riding a boat. Look at this huge cake castle. What an amazing picture of all of the neat things in Sweet Town. Okay, so now we will continue on to the conclusion. So, Things in the scene seemed to be fading, right? Pum poof! Marie fell from an unimaginable height. My, what a crash! When she opened her eyes, she was lying in her own bed. It was broad daylight, and her mother was standing before her, saying, "Well, what a sleep you've had. Breakfast has been ready for a long time now." Of course, dear reader, you understand what happened, don't you? Marie, confounded and amazed by all the wonderful things she'd seen, had finally drifted off to sleep in Marzipan Castle, and the chariot boys, or the pages, or perhaps the princesses themselves, had carried her home and put her to bed. "Oh, Mamma, darling," said Marie, "you'd be surprised to hear where young Mr. Drosselmeyer took me during the night, and what beautiful things I've seen." She told her mother the same faithful account that I have told you. Mamma listened in astonishment. When Marie had finished, she said to her lovely daughter, "You have had a long, beautiful dream, Marie, but now you must put it all out of your head." Was it a dream? Marie insisted that she hadn't been dreaming at all, so her mother took her to the glass cabinet in the sitting room, lifted out Nutcracker from his usual position on the third shelf, and said, "You silly girl, how can you believe that this wooden figure can live and move around on its own?" The whole family waited for her reply. "Oh, Mamma," answered Marie, "I know perfectly well that Nutcracker is young Mr. Drosselmeyer from Nuremberg, Godfather Drosselmeyer's nephew." Her mother and father burst out laughing. Marie nearly broke into tears. "Oh, Father, now you're laughing at my poor Nutcracker too," she cried. "I'll have you know he spoke very highly of you. When we arrived at Marzipan Castle, and he was introducing me to his sisters, the princesses, he said that you were a highly respectable medical man." The laughter grew louder. Louise and even Fritz joined in, and Marie ran into the next room, took the Mouse King's 7 crowns from her box, and then returned and handed them to her mother, saying, "Look here then, Mamma, these are the Mouse King's 7 crowns, which young Mr. Drosselmeyer gave me last night as proof that he had won the battle." Here her mother gazed in amazement at the tiny crowns, which were made of some very shiny metal that she'd never seen before, and had been worked more beautifully than any human hands could have worked them. Dr. Stahlbaum could not stop looking at the crowns either, and both of her parents begged Marie to tell them where she really had gotten them. She could only repeat what she had said before. When her father scolded her and accused her of lying, she began to cry bitterly and said, "Can't you believe your own daughter?" At this moment, the door opened and Godfather Drosselmeyer came in, calling, "Hello, hello, what's going on? Why is my little Marie crying?" Dr. Stahlbaum told him the whole story and showed him the crowns. Drosselmeyer barely had to look at them before he declared, "Stuff and nonsense! These are the crowns I used to wear on my watch chain. I gave them as a present to Marie on her 2nd birthday. Don't you remember?" Dr. and Mrs. Stahlbaum couldn't actually remember, but Marie, seeing that her father's and mother's faces had relaxed again, ran up to Drosselmeyer and cried, "You understand everything, Godfather. Now explain it to them. Let them hear from your own lips that my Nutcracker is your nephew, young Mr. Drosselmeyer of Nuremberg, and that he's the one who gave me the crowns." Drosselmeyer made a very angry face and muttered, "Oh, that's pure nonsense." Marie's father set her down in front of him and said, "Now listen, Marie. Let's put an end to all this storytelling once and for all. I'm not going to allow any more of it. And if I ever hear you saying again that this idiotic, ugly Nutcracker is your godfather's nephew, I'll throw him out the window. Not just him, but all of your other playthings too, even Miss Clara." Of course, after that, poor Marie didn't dare say another word about the one subject that occupied her entire mind, though I'm sure, dear reader, that you realize how impossible it would be for anyone who had seen all that Marie had seen to forget it. I regret to say that even Fritz turned his back on his sister when she wanted to talk to him about the wondrous land in which she'd been so happy. In fact, he would grind his teeth and mutter, "Silly girl." Rather a mean thing for an unwise, kind brother to say to his sister. Since Fritz no longer believed what his sister had said, he ordered a public parade and formally withdrew the reprimand that he had given to his soldiers. To replace the plumes that he had taken from them, he gave them much taller and finer ones of goose feathers. Marie was left with no other choice but to keep her adventures to herself. But images of the enchanting fairy realm lingered in her mind, and the music of that delightful, happy country still rang deliciously in her ears. Whenever she recalled these wonders, she experienced them again, As a result, she often sat quiet and meditative, absorbed within herself. Everybody scolded her for being such a dreamer. Then one day, it so happened that Godfather Drosselmeyer was repairing one of the clocks in the house, while Marie was sitting by the glass cabinet, lost in her dreams, gazing at Nutcracker. At once she said aloud, despite herself, "Ah, dear Mr. Drosselmeyer, if only you were really alive, I wouldn't act like Princess Pirlipat. I'd never reject you, no matter how ugly you got." "Humph, what nonsense," said Godfather Drosselmeyer. As he spoke, there came such a tremendous rumble and bang that Marie was knocked out of her chair, unconscious. When she came back to her senses, her mother was bustling around her. "How could you fall off your chair like that, a big girl like you?" Mama asked her. "Now here's Godfather Drosselmeyer's nephew, come all the way from Nuremberg. Please behave yourself." Marie looked up. Her godfather had on his yellow coat and his glass wig, and was smiling with pleasure. He was holding the hand of a small but very handsome young gentleman. The boy's face was hued with red and white. He wore an elegant red coat trimmed in gold, with white silk stockings and shoes, and a lovely bouquet of flowers in his shirt frill. His hair was elaborately styled and powdered, and a magnificent pigtail hung down his back. The sword at his side sparkled and shone. It seemed to be made entirely of jewels, and the hat under his arm was woven of silk. The young man had very courtly manners. He had brought, as presents for Marie, a number of delightful toys, including the very same sugar figures that the Mouse King had destroyed. He also was carrying a beautiful saber for Fritz. Should we see the picture? Here he is, shaking hands with Marie. And here's Godfather Drosselmeyer and her mother. At the table, he cracked nuts for everybody. Even the very hardest nut had to yield to him. He placed them in his mouth with his left hand, tugged at his pigtail with his right, and crack, they all fell into pieces. Marie grew red as a rose while she watched this charming young gentleman. She grew even redder when, after dinner, young Drosselmeyer asked her to go with him to the glass cabinet, to the sitting room. "Please play together nicely, children," said Godfather Drosselmeyer. "Now that my clocks are all fixed, I don't mind you playing in there." As soon as young Drosselmeyer was alone with Marie, he went down on one knee and spoke as follows. "Ah, my superb Mademoiselle Stahlbaum, see here at your feet the fortunate Drosselmeyer whose life you saved on this very spot. You were kind enough to say that you would not have despised me as Princess Pirlipat did, if I had been turned ugly for your sake. When I heard your words, I immediately ceased to be a lowly nutcracker and was restored to my former pleasing face and figure. Most exquisite lady, please bless me with your hand. Share with me my crown and kingdom, and reign with me in Marzipan Castle, for there I am now king." Marie raised him to his feet and said gently, "Dear Mr. Drosselmeyer, you are a gentle, sweet man, and you reign over a delightful country of charming and elegant people. I will be your bride." So it was that Marie became young Drosselmeyer's bride-to-be. In a year's time, I am told, he came to take her away in a golden coach drawn by silver horses. At the wedding, 22,000 of the most lovely dolls danced together, all glittering with pearls and diamonds. To this day, Marie is the queen of the realm of sparkling Christmas forests and glowing marzipan castles, in a realm, in short, where the most wonderful things of every kind may be seen by those who have eyes to see them. And thus ends the tale of Nutcracker and the Mouse King. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that today and that you have a wonderful rest of your evening. We'll see you back here tomorrow for Trixie Belden. Bye.